Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Friedrich. I'm a pre-sales engineer for VMware, and today we're going to have a special session regarding BetterTogether and something special because I'm working for VMware, but I'm putting the Microsoft logo on my slide. So we're going to discuss how we work together and how we integrate with them, how we enhance and extend Microsoft products in general. And the idea is to have a slide show on a couple of components that we do together. So we have a roadmap alignment, but also things that we, from a VMware point of view, say this is where you need VMware to extend the capabilities of what Microsoft is offering. So a little bit of history, I would say. If you see the nice logos that Microsoft had during the couple of years, it started, of course, with everybody remembers the times of Windows 3.11, Windows NT, and it became the really big, the giant company that it is today, with solutions in every aspect of the IT industry. So it can be cloud-based, it can be end-user computing-based, it can be still on-prem, it can be application-aware. So they have something for everything. What I mostly tend to believe is any challenge that you have as an IT organization, well, Microsoft can help you solve that part. But something strange happened in 1998 in a garage in Palo Alto somewhere. We started a company and it's called VMware. And VMware started with the hypervisor. So maybe everybody remembers the times of HSX, and then it was a software program that we ran on Windows to virtualize extra Windows machines on that Windows virtual machine. So it was software based. So it was not a bare metal hypervisor at that time. But we grew as a company, and at a certain time we were the best, I would say, or we challenged Microsoft on that part, and we grasped a big chunk of the market, I would say, on hypervisor. So we were a bit of seen as big competition, and we were in a fight because everybody was saying, hey, we like VMware and vSphere, and Hyper-V wasn't that good. So we had a struggle, I would say, a competition battle. And now things are changing, and we're going to focus on the fight for the user, because at the end of the day, hypervisor or everything is cool on that part, but I would say I really tend to believe that I like the end user more, or the employee experience more, and because maybe it's because of my role. I'm focused, of course, on everything that is digital workspace related. And the fight for the user is, in general, if you look at the HR market, for example, if you look at employees that are looking for a new job, they are looking into things more than only a wage and a car and a nice fancy laptop. They are also saying, hey, maybe I want to use my Mac or my personal device. How can you do onboarding on those kind of devices? Can you do bring your own, choose your own? So it's more of employee experience and productivity, and that's why we have a fight for that user, because it's not only Microsoft and VMware that are looking at that user, but also organizations like yourselves are looking at new employees and attracting new employees. And this is where everything is going to. And throughout the years, what Microsoft brought to the table was, maybe we all remember the NT4 systems, and it was the first version where terminal server was related to. And then years later, we started with published applications, and now we have Windows 10 multi-session, so Windows Virtual Desktop. So a lot of change throughout the years. and always related to everything that has to do with end user computing or digital workspace. So really basic to advanced. And if we look then from that endpoint device, we started with the desktops, managing those desktops. And maybe everybody remembers SMS, so system management. And now SCCM or Microsoft Endpoint Manager already. And if we look then at the transition from PCLM to mobile device management and looking at more mobile devices, if you look at the Microsoft stack, that was then Intune and those kind of stories. Then already enterprise mobility management is really focusing on security and really locking down those devices. And then at the end, unified endpoint management with Microsoft Endpoint Manager and saying, hey, we need a holistic system for all our devices, not only Windows 10, but also iOS, Android, and so on. And if we look then at the story around how do we access everything? If I would ask in a live audience, I would ask the question saying, hey, who connects with a VPN every day to his office or to his office location and making sure that he connects to all his data? Well, a lot of hands would go up. But now we're already making it more clear and saying, hey, VPN, is that still necessary? Is that still safe? So we're going to access management and really building a zero trust layer and making sure that you have an approach based on not only your device, but also the location based on what kind of application that you want to use and building that trust based on all those components and context aware. And Microsoft has a solution for that. It's to a digital workspace. So all those components from terminal servers to WVD to from PCLM to UEM and then to a zero trust approach, everything is bundled in Microsoft 365. But let's be honest, 95% of my customers have indeed Microsoft in-house and use Microsoft applications. You always have the exceptions around the Googles and the Amazons and those kind of customers that say, hey, I really believe in that kind. But if we look at those Microsoft customers, they have a totally different set of third-party application sets. Maybe they don't want to use Azure AD, but they want to use Ping Identity or Okta. They are using ServiceNow for everything that is related around help desk and change management. Maybe they're using an Active Directory on-prem, but they're using G Suite for everything that is collaboration. Maybe they're using VMware or Citrix for enhancing the terminal server or enhancing Windows Virtual Desktop. Maybe they don't use Windows 10, but they only use Mac OS and iOS. So we really have a big landscape on all those third-party toolings, and then Microsoft 365 potentially doesn't cover the load because you need to think about all those third-party integrations. And we see that as everyone needs a digital workspace. So if you look at, for example, the knowledge worker, he potentially uses Office, but he also uses his Okta or his Ping Federate to make sure that he's authenticated. He uses ServiceNow, he uses Google, he uses all those tools that he wants to use and he needs to use to do his daily job. A field worker, potentially they don't need Office, they only need email, for example, and they need a specific line of business application. The remote worker, well, potentially we're all remote workers for the moment, but that's the guy that is always making sure that he's at home or at another location, because remote worker, maybe we need to call it flexible working, because if you think about remote, then you think about Office as their main location. But why would Office be a main location? Maybe Office is just another location like another. You can be at home or you can be at the airport. And then you go to the next type. That would be a road warrior then. And a road warrior is then the person that goes on holiday and takes his laptop or travels around the world for business meetings and always works on the latest things, not always connected, but needs to be connected via 4G and those kind of bandwidth limitations that you need to take into account. And then everything around unmanned kiosks, specific devices that are unmanned and not being specific for one user. And everyone needs a digital workspace, but not every digital workspace is the same, like I explained. And in 2019, something changed. And maybe there's a booklet somewhere in Michael Dell, his office, and in Microsoft offices and in VMware offices with a booklet with secret plans to conquer the world. That's not that I'm aware of, but I always have a big imagination, I would say. But in 2019, there was an event, on Dell Technologies, and a certain moment, this was a picture pre-COVID, I would say, because there's no social distancing at that moment of time. But we were back friends. We announced a couple of things around how we are going to work together and aligning our roadmap and making sure that we go together to customers and making sure that Dell as a hardware vendor or even software, because VMware is a part of Dell Technologies, and then Microsoft all together bring that to the customer and making sure that a customer has that full digital workspace, not only that Microsoft 365, but all those components, and can we integrate all those components and can we work together? So we announced a couple of things, but let's focus on these three, I would say. We focused on Windows 10 and accelerating transition to modern management, where we integrate with, for example, SCCM or Microsoft Endpoint Manager to make sure that customers that are already using Workspace ONE as their tool to do enterprise mobility management, so everything that is ruggedized or specific iOS, Android, we will not manage that part, but we will enhance employee experience. We'll gather data and we'll make sure that they have the access layer to that to those systems. Of course, we can help customers migrate to Workspace ONE and making sure that Windows 10 is fully managed by Workspace ONE. Office 365, we can also help customers, and I have a customer, one of my customers is a big Microsoft customer, most of them. They have Office 365 and they wanted to know more on how can we see how many users are using Office 365 next to our other applications. They wanted to see the adoption rate. They wanted to secure it a little bit more than what already Office 365 brings to the table. And they wanted to do that from one platform so that they can manage their Office 365 from one platform, but they can also secure other applications from that same platform. And then lastly, but not leastly, I would say, is Azure. So everything that, and I sometimes believe that all roads lead to Azure, because Microsoft has full the intention to make sure that customers go to Azure and that there is a big spend on Azure part. And that's why I believe that Windows Virtual Desktop, for example, putting your applications close to your application layer or your VDI is always a really good thing to do. And Workspace ONE would be the glue there with the best user experience, the best modern management, and the best security, and making sure that not only the Microsoft 365 stack is managed really well, but also all the components around that story. And this is not a one shot. That was not, hey, Dell Technologies 2019, let's stay on the stage and let's have like a friendly handshake. No, it's really going jointly, making sure that we jointly engineer and do co-development on certain things. So making sure that we have a joint offering. Roadmap alignment. It's like, a customer of mine yesterday told me, I want, if Microsoft has this capabilities A, B, and C, we want to make sure that VMware is always aligned on making sure that if you want to integrate with that, that you also have integrations with A, B, and C. So that roadmap alignment is really important. And then of course, jointly focusing on that fight for the user, that user experience, and then bringing that value to Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Azure. And I've built 6 points on how we integrate with and why it would be valuable for customers and partners to look into that. And the first one is focused on multi-tenancy. And I've found this picture last week while preparing this presentation, and a picture says more than 1,000 words, but it explains the fact of a multi-tenancy. In a Microsoft world, there is no concept of multi-tenancy. You get a tenant and that's your customer tenant. What does that mean? If you look at the birdies here, the birdhouses and the cages, if you need to have access to one tenant, you can have one admin that goes into the house, but the second admin goes into that house, he will get access to most of those things. So in a multi-tenant structure, you have the same platform, the same pole, but you can build your stacks on top of that. For example, if we think about an acquisition that happens, well, okay, you build a new structure and you build new houses on that with new settings, with new colors, with new profiles. So really looking into that multi-tenancy part, that's really important. And I'll explain a little bit more on why that is important. Well, if we look at a global scale economy, or in general a global scale industry or customer, then you have a top layer, a global layer, and potentially in EMEA and a US based layer. And it goes down fully till the end. What we will do is we'll create a multi-tenant structure. That means that we can create policies and profiles on top layer, and we can push everything down on inheritance parts. We can create app distribution on a layer of the UK layer and a separate app distribution on a Germany layer, because potentially there are other settings and other applications. Same for policy management, same for privacy, because in Germany, for example, there's a device cannot be managed fully by an organization. The user should have the choice. So privacy control is really important in Germany and other countries also, but these are things that we need to take into account. So for example, you could set other privacy controls in Germany than in the UK. Integration, extensibility, acquisitions that I already told. So those kind of things is something that we can help with, because what we can do if a customer has multiple tenants from the Microsoft side, we can connect the UK side to a tenant, and we can connect the Germany side to another tenant and push settings from that platform, from our platform to those tenants. So if you want to push DLP settings, for example, to one tenant that the users are connecting to, perfect. You can do that from the Germany side. If you want to connect and set other settings, then you can do that from the UK side. If you look at roles, for example, what also happens, what I explained, if you have a one-tenant approach, once you have access to that tenant, you mostly see a lot of things. We can do that granularly. We do role-based access and on a tenant layer. So on a multi-tenant approach, you could say for UK, I will have only IT operators and device admins that can connect to that. Help desk admin can do the global, but they can only do device viewing and do remote assistance. So really doing a granular approach on everything that has to do with role-based access. And if we look on how Intune solves this, they have groups, and groups are a good thing, but because we have a multi-tenant approach, we can do that from a top layer down, and we have settings in those layers to make sure that we work with smart groups, for example, or that organizational structure, while you say, okay, we don't need that, all those types of specifics. And then 100 times 2 times 10 times 8 times 10 makes it 160,000 groups. I would say have fun with managing all of those groups. The second one is focused on the broader support. If we look at macOS, and it's not a picture of my home situation, I would say, but we have a lot of devices running around, and some prefer Apple. I'm one of those. So if we look at how Microsoft manages those, Microsoft will go with Jamf most of the times. They have capabilities baked into Intune, but we go a step further. We have native capabilities. We have, for example, in our agent, we have the Monkey. We use Monkey in the backend. So that means that we have almost 99% of the capabilities that a Jamf wants to deliver. And we can cover a lot of things from our platform in general already, and you don't need a third-party tool anymore. Same for Chrome OS. Microsoft doesn't have a solution around Chrome OS. In the Belgian market, Chrome OS is not that big yet, but there are a lot of possibilities there because it could be used as a cheap alternative and as a mobile alternative for Surface, but also extending it to your own data center and using published applications, for example, or VDI, to make sure that you have that access to all your applications. And potentially the ruggedized market. What kind of tools do the ruggedized market use? They will go to scanners. They will look at ruggedized devices, specific devices like a Zebra or a Honeywell. And that's something that we're really strong in, and that is something that we dominate the market. So if you look at for example, a retail or warehousing, those kind of things, those specific use cases, that is something that we dominate and that we're really strong in. That's why we can enhance that part and saying, hey, all those settings, those multi-tenancies, and those settings that you want to send to Office 365, we'll do that from our console, and we'll also manage those devices in a good way. And we do that seamlessly. We do that from one place to make sure that a user has the same seamless access to all your devices. It's fully mobile single sign-on using a trust. So even on an Android, we can do a mobile single sign-on and a trust between those applications. So that means that the user only needs to log in once. If we look at self-service, we integrate, of course, with ServiceNow and so on, but we try to do an out-of-the-box experience and we'll try to do a self-service story. Just to explain my own story, I received a laptop, I think 5 weeks ago or something, 6 weeks ago. And I've just opened my laptop and it just asked my Wi-Fi, my username, my email address and my password, and it started enrolling. And after like a half an hour, I had a fully functional laptop. So this is where we're going to, and making sure that users that are working remotely, instead of sending that laptop first to IT, making sure that they need to image it and then going back to sending back to the end user. Well, now you can send it immediately to the end user and making sure that it is self-service. Multi-factor. I've said, okay, we integrate, of course, with everything that Microsoft does. So we integrate with the Azure multi-factor authenticator. But of course, we integrate with our own solution, and we also integrate with potentially other solutions. And then last but not least is looking at privacy by design. We try to make sure that personal data and personal apps are segregated from everything that is business-wise. And if we look at the values that it brings, it is really looking at reducing time to productivity. So really adding new applications from months to days and adding it in a console and making sure that an access layer is the first way to go. And then for IT in general, no more app provisioning, less password related help desk tickets, for example, because everything is self-service related. And this is then how the out-of-the-box experience looks like, making sure that it's always the same feeling on any type of device. So if you think about the Dell devices and out of the factory, where we integrate, of course, also with an autopilot, or where we integrate with macOS and then Apple Business Manager for that part, for Chrome OS with Zero Touch from Google, and then everything that is related on mobile, iOS, Android, and so on. The third part is around employee experience. And employee experience is focused on a couple of things, and we're really focused on that full life cycle and taking into account and saying, hey, we start from accepting an offer and saying, hey, I signed that letter. We can do that from our intelligent hub. So what will happen is that the user will receive an SMS message and he can already download the intelligent hub with a pre-populated account, and he can accept his offer using DocuSign and integrations again with other third-party vendors. You can, we do integrations with ServiceNow for choosing your own device and making sure that it's getting ordered and making sure that it's getting shipped to that end user. Then employee experience, like I explained in the last slide around out of the box and onboarding, is really looking at quickly setting up devices, meeting the team, making sure that you have connection to the intranet, learn about applications, what are the applications that you need and want to use for your daily tasks. And we also integrate again with an AI tool. It's a virtual assistant and it's IBM Watson, and more are coming. And if we look then after first day, of course, the second day is making sure that mobile SSO is always up and running and that we have a single sign-on throughout any device, and making sure that a user doesn't need to log in twice for connecting to his applications. Where we also are really strong at is doing mobile flows or acting on notifications, I would say. It's pushing notifications to that end device, making sure that you can push, for example, and saying, hey, there's somebody that wants to do an alert. Watch out for these days. Today, we had a COVID alert, blah, blah, blah. We want to address everybody that went to the office. Or we can do also integrations with expense notes, for example, and saying, hey, we'll push a notification saying you need to approve or decline that expense note. So really looking at enhancing that employee experience and building that throughout the system and using Intelligent Hub as a front layer to all those notifications. And then offboarding, making sure if a user leaves the company that we device wipe his corporate settings, corporate owned devices. We enterprise wipe, so only remove the bring your own entitlements, making sure that he doesn't have access to any applications anymore. And of course that the virtual assistants also disappears then. And this is a little bit on how the experience then would look like at the Microsoft part. Is where do we start? We have a lot of potential consoles where a Microsoft user can go to, and we want to make it as seamless as possible. And using Intelligent Hub as that front layer, making sure that we then connect with Azure AD to integrate with authentication mechanism, but that a front user sees the same experience on any type of device. So if he connects with a Win 10 or he connects with a Mac OS or a Chrome OS or an iOS or an Android, it will always be the same look and feel of our console. And we're adding and we're going the extra mile. So it's because we know a lot of info, or we gather a lot of information about the devices, about the users, about the context that they're working in, the location. That's why we can add an extra layer. So we get visibility and experience. And what experience is difficult to explain. Is if I would ask the question, what is experience? That is something that is really difficult to do. Because for one, it's okay, if my laptop starts up and it only takes like 10 seconds, that's good. But if it takes 20, that's bad. But for another person, it would be 50 seconds is good and 2 minutes is bad. So getting experience based on data is always much better. You have the metrics to prove something. And we'll use metrics like, okay, hard disk failures, application crashes, those kind of metrics, and we will do that cross-platform. We'll use then AI machine learning based on that data. We'll use predictive and proactive remediation. We'll look at the data and saying, hey, potentially your hard disk is failing. We'll need to replace that. And if you look at application crashes, a flight recorder would be really nice, because what mostly happens, hey, they call help desk. Hey, I had a crash of my application. It's the second time, but now it's working again. Okay, what happened? So looking at a flight recorder and saying, okay, what happened in the last day or in the last week or in the last 2 weeks? Okay, we can see, and we can again look at it at a situation and say, this is the issue, and we'll resolve it as quickly as possible. And then of course, user feedback. Again, coming back to the example of what is a good experience. If you ask the user, hey, was this good? Is it resolved, and was it a good experience? He will say no, or yes, or maybe, and why. And of course, industry insights, using the verticals like retail, like manufacturing, and so on, using those data sets, and also saying, hey, potentially for that industry, you need to do this, this, and this. So really looking at going the extra mile. If we look at the fourth one, it's focused on everything that we already have. If we look at on the left side of the bridge and on the right side of the bridge, it's looking at, hey, this is how we did it today or yesterday, I would say, is looking at the client server era. It's the SSCMs, is making sure that everybody goes to the office, is connected to the office. It's they require a LAN connection or VPN connection into that network to make sure that it's that the device is managed really well, that it's up to date always, that we do network-based security, mainly focused on the firewall and so on. If we look at across the bridge and where we want to go, it's going to the mobile cloud for any type of device. So enrollment-based, so that the domain is not a hard requirement anymore, but really looking at an identity-based security, looking at that end user, looking at his device that he is using, where is he coming from? So really looking at a zero trust approach. And then instead of managing a device, it's really looking at a policy-based management. It's not only user-based, but also looking at, okay, we'll not lock down that device fully, but we'll look at the context and then do policies based on that context. Really scalable. If you want to scale out and you want to send out 100 or 500 or 1,000 new devices, it's just managing those new devices, enrolling them, and making sure that it goes out of the box. So a couple of tools that we integrate with, because we know that organizations are already using those kind of tools, is, for example, SCCM, and looking at the PC lifecycle management that is already in-house. We are not here to rip and replace the SCCM story, but we are here to integrate with them and saying, okay, for those kind of use cases, you can already look at modern management. And modern management is then the always online, the always up to date. So really looking at going into a new style of management of those devices. If we what do we do with integration then, is really looking at your collections, your groups, all of those things will integrate those with our Workspace ONE platform. And the collections, the groups, and everything will reuse those, and those applications will be pushed on a modern way and always online. So you will not be domain or not connected to the network immediately. You will be on any type of connection. And the moment he's connected, we'll push those applications and so on. So you'll do the management. You can still do that from the SCCM part. So you can still push your applications from that part, but we'll do the management and make sure that everything is seamless from our console. And of course, it wouldn't be a full story if we wouldn't integrate with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. That was also one of the announcements that we did on VMware last year, where we are focused on everything that Windows 10 is focused on Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and will be managed, first of all, with SCCM Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We'll be managing the non-Windows management devices, and we'll add information based on employee experience. So what I've told about the predictive and the proactive remediation, for example, or gathering information cross-platform, and we'll add employee experience based on that information. So we'll use information that we get from Microsoft Endpoint Manager and do the orchestration between those two elements. The fifth one is focused on security. And security is a bit broad, I would say, because we focus on a couple of things. First of all is the end user. Do we know who the end user is? Do we know if she logs in with a password, or does she use multi-factor authentication? Is that enough? Is a password enough? Or do we need biometric, for example? So really looking at that user. But that's only something that the user knows himself, so the password and so on, but also looking at user behavior. So when does that user log in? On what kind of device? And does he use new devices? How many applications does he use? What kind of application does he use? Does he start using new application? So, and really using that as information as a baseline, and looking, hey, this is the baseline that we create for that user, and making sure that we can add that functionality, and saying, if you cross that baseline, we'll add security. So if you add new applications, or if you add a new device, or if you access from a new location, potentially, that could be a trigger to add new security. Then endpoints. Of course, endpoints need to be secured, but we live in a world where you bring your own device. So thinking about data loss prevention, personal apps segregation with corporate apps, those kind of things. Or the full scale of all your endpoints. So connecting with your macOS, but also with a Windows, with an iOS, with an Android. So all of those devices. Data and applications. So looking at what is confidential, what kind of application need extra security. If, for example, if you look at an HR application, if you want to access that, maybe we'll need to check if it's really you. So multi-factor authentication based on that application. So really triggering it based on one application, and not on the full suite of all your applications that you want to offer. And then last but not least is connection. Where are you coming from? Where are you working from? What network are you connecting from? And not only the network where you're connecting from, but also the network where you're connecting to. Because most of the times you connect to, if you connect via VPN, you connect to a full segment or a full subnet, and then you get access to that subnet. That's maybe not the best thing. You only need 2 or 3 application servers in that subnet. So really thinking about the connection layer. And if we combine everything together, it's using analytics. Again, back to that employee experience part. Well, we use the same basis of analytics to add extra security. And we integrate then with third-party tools. For example, we integrate with Carbon Black, of course, that's our own security next-gen AV, but also a Trend Micro, a McAfee, a Lookout. So those kind of security vendors. We integrate with the critical vulnerability exploit database online to get the exploit database and seeing what patches need to be installed on certain devices. So really integrating with third-party tools. And that is something that Microsoft brings to the table for Microsoft, of course, but we bring that to the table for, again, cross-platform. If we look at users, and already explained a little bit, but is really looking at biometric, so the passwordless authentication, looking at multi-factor authentication and integrating with the Microsoft Authenticator, but also integrating with third-party tools, adding an extra layer of conditional access. It's a good thing that Azure conditional access exists, but it means that you already are connecting to Azure at that moment of time. We're in the front end of that. So we can already stop before you're accessing Azure and making sure if you want to access that application, you need to have a compliant device before you access your Azure device, your Azure conditional access on that base. And then dynamic risk scoring, like I explained, the baseline on what a user is scored at and saying, hey, he's using new applications or new locations or new devices. This is not normal, so we'll add one of those multi-factor authentication, or we'll send them an email and so on. If we look at endpoints, of course, everything that is related about device management is really looking into policies, really looking into security compliancy, making sure that if his policy is not implemented on that device, that he's not compliant, and that we'll do a device remediation on that part. And we integrate, of course, natively then with Carbon Black. So if Carbon Black notifies our systems and saying, hey, this system is impacted by a Trojan or something alike, we'll intervene, we'll say, hey, sorry, but you're not allowed anymore to access any application before the remediation starts. So Carbon Black will remediate that device and try to remove, of course, that threat. And once Carbon Black says, hey, the status is okay again, perfect, you can go forward and go back into all your applications. If we look at applications and data in general, of course, data loss prevention is one of those. I always call it data loss prevention. I always compare it with accidental loss, because it's really going into that factor. It's really a big difference between intentionally stealing something and accidentally losing something. If you want to steal something and you want to take a print screen of your screen and you're not able to do that, you just take another phone and you take a picture of it. So if you want to steal something, that's always possible. If data loss prevention it gives you a bit of a security feeling to make sure that you can not copy paste, you cannot copy your data from your corporate OneDrive to your private OneDrive and so on. And then again, adding conditional access based on every type of application, using again Azure Information Protection, for example, to do tagging on certain documents. So using information from Microsoft and adding an extra layer of security. And then something totally unique, because there's nobody else on the market that has something similar, and how we integrate on of course, in our backend. It's Per App VPN is something unique, where we integrate and say only one application needs that VPN tunnel. So it's not the full device that is connected to that subnet, but it's only one application that is connected to that subnet. So that's already a trim down, because if your device is compromised, it cannot use that tunnel. It's only the one application that can use that tunnel. And then in the backend, micro-segmentation, of course, we can say, okay, this device, this application is using that Per App VPN tunnel. He's connecting to a certain subnet, but because of micro-segmentation, we can also say you can only connect to application server 1, 2, and 3. So really adding an extra layer of security. And then at the end, it's all about analytics, using third-party data, for example, or using making sure that we use sensors and looking at the data on your devices, if it's compromised or not, and then intervening as quickly as possible. Because the moment we see a change, we can intervene and making sure that that device is quarantined and that we put a tag on it and making sure that it's not available anymore for that end user before it's remediated. And what we see at other customers is a bit of a zero trust control plane. And this is mainly how it looks like. So you have a management layer, security layer, and they have a full suite of all of those things to manage a lot of devices and users. What we are saying is, okay, we integrate with a lot of them, and most of them even, and will be the platform to manage most of them, and making sure that you can access, for example, even Citrix applications via our platform. So we'll be the front-end layer from a security point of view, making sure that that user, that device, that location that you're coming from, that it's secure enough and that you can access any application. And the sixth one, the last one, is all roads lead to Azure. I already said it at the beginning of the discussion, but in my opinion, of course, is we try to, as a Microsoft organization, tries to have as much as possible consumption-based approach, because it's predictable and they have a constant revenue stream. Same for us, same for any type of vendor that is in the SaaS or the EaaS market. But if you look at, in general, if we look at market and what Gartner is saying is by 2023, 30% of today's on-prem VDI users will access a workspace using the cloud, so desktop as a service. So that means that your applications are potentially moving to the cloud and that you want to have your published applications or your VDI close to that application. So Microsoft has tremendous value on Windows Virtual Desktop, and Windows Virtual Desktop, we all know it by heart by saying, okay, this is the next version of terminal service for me, because it's multi-session Windows 10, and it's focused, of course, on a client operating system for the first time. So really looking at adding the best user experience, enhanced security, simplified management on those kind of things, and it's based on standardized global and the secure Azure platform. But what we say is, okay, perfect, Windows Virtual Desktop gets you at a certain level, but we see in the partnership together, and this is a co-joint slide, where we say, okay, but customers will still have an on-prem environment, for example, and we'll need to manage that on-prem environment. So we'll use Horizon Cloud to do the on-prem environment, but also that Windows Virtual Desktop or that Horizon Cloud on Azure part. So everything that is related around terminal services or published applications in your Azure stack. Advanced protocols, you have the choice. So it's not only RDP, but you can use our BLAST protocol. Again, in a hybrid world, that's seamless for the end user. Using a universal broker, making sure that it's always the same broker across your tenants. So for example, if you have multiple tenants at Microsoft, but also on-prem and multiple environments, it always be the same broker. We'll deliver a management GUI. We'll deliver a management GUI based on a fully automated scripting, for example. So in 45 minutes or about, we can set up a Horizon environment, Horizon Cloud, and spin up your Azure tenant to use that Horizon Cloud platform. So really making it sure that it's only GUI based, and you don't need scripting. And I know WVD version 2 already has a lot of functionality in the console, also GUI based, but still some scripting is needed. And that's why we say we can do it fully automated and fully GUI based. We add on top of that user environment manager and application management. We integrate, for example, with FS Logics, but also App Volumes 4.0 is came out, where we say package once and you reuse it on any type of cloud. And then last but not least is power management. Power management is quite important. I saw one of my customers that was spending around $35, $40 per user. After we triggered power management, we could cut it in half. So we can help in an advanced power management system. Instead of for the moment in WVD and Azure, everything is scripting based. You can do that, but it needs to be scripted. For us, it's just a check in the box. And our partnership goes indeed further than that. We really accelerate that cloud journey. We had customers abroad where we spun up around 7,000 or 8,000 desktops in 4 days' time. So really helping customers, accelerating and really quickly helping customer at that part. Maximize your cost savings based on power management and so on. And using that user experience, using that access layer, but also using that protocol that we have and we own to have that seamless experience across systems. And you can believe my word for it and saying, hey, we have customers and so on that tell our story. But of course, Forrester, Gartner, and so on are saying that we're the best in what we do. We're always on top. So if you would look at Gartner, if you would look at Forrester and so on, we're always top right and we're always leader. And that means something. That means that we're doing a good job and that we have a good vision and a good strategy, but that we also execute and that we can help customers. And at the end, it's all about the Workspace ONE platform. And you can look at it from a base point of view and saying, oh, we need to look at your device layer, your application layer, really at the context layer of who is connecting, what kind of device are they using, what kind of application, where is it coming from, and then looking at services. What kind of services do we want to deliver? We want to deliver unified endpoint management, for example, and manage all of those devices. We want to deliver zero trust conditional access integrated with Azure AD, for example. We want to deliver VDI and published application across any cloud. We want to use app management like App Volumes and making sure that you package once and use across the clouds. Mobile flows for your notifications, but also for doing your expense notes, for example, again. And then on top is using that analytics layer, really looking at all the data that we gather and making it sure that we automate and orchestrate that information and that we say, hey, you can automate based on the context that we receive. And then also visualize it, making sure that if you want to see how many Windows devices have been up to date last week, and if I push a new update, okay, how long will it take before every machine is up to date again? So really giving insight in not only your end user experience, but also the engagement from an HR point of view, giving insights to a CIO or a CISO, and for a management point of view, of course, for the IT ops, the admin layer. And if you want to know more, we're at the end of my presentation. If you want to know more, there's a lot of information around text on Windows Virtual Desktop, but also on Workspace ONE and how we work together with Microsoft on techzone.vmware.com. And I would suggest to go there. It's quite big. It's a quite big site, but there's a lot of information, short movies, white papers, architectural views. So a lot of things that we can help you with. And for the rest, I would like to thank you for your attention and being here. And I would say I still have a couple of minutes. So there's a Q&A button. If you want to have, or if you have any questions, you can ask them now. But I also will be available in the chat in the first half an hour, from 12 to 12:30 in the chat. Okay, no questions are coming. Perfect. Hope to see you soon. And if you have any questions, just go in the chat window of the Arrow virtual event. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.